And so comes to pass the war of blood in the border princes. The first snows of winter have set in, and the campaigning season is done. The Dark Elf invasion precipitated a raging conflict that drew in many combatants and saw most of the western and southern border regions set aflame. The scars of war will persist for many years, but thanks to the valiant efforts of the High Elves, the region will, in time, heal, and new settlements will rise up in place of the old. Of Lord Veruvio himself, none can be sure of his ultimate fate. The Dreadlord's last push on Malco failed to capture the town, but he set most of the regional capital ablaze. Once he saw that the battle was lost, the Dreadlord took to the air on his stolen dragon and soared away to the Black Ark's citadel of spite. Local fishermen reported seeing the baleful towers disappearing over the horizon. Of his followers, Melandira was slain in the opening battle of the campaign, but her replacement, Kyra Shadowcaster, managed to escape the destruction of her army in the Dark Elf HQ and return to her master aboard his ship. Where the Ark will sail is unknown, for it is unlikely that Veruvio would risk Malekith's wrath after squandering such a large force, not to mention the many backers that he now cannot repay. The High Elves succeeded in their war aims, driving back the Druchi invaders and carving out a decent principality of their own. Unfortunately, their drive to beat the Dark Elves saw them fall into conflict with almost every local lord in the border princes, so they are very much seen as foreign occupiers. The principal towns of Malco and Aldium have burned down and will require great amount of material to support them from their new overlords, lest they starve or freeze to death in the coming winter. A perhaps tainted prize, the region will require a permanent garrison, and it will be many decades before it can prove profitable. Prince Aeorlus and his lady wife Phelan will stay this first winter, as the storms will make the passage home too dangerous to risk. But when the spring comes around, they will send for a lesser noble to assume stewardship of the outpost. Prince Rylian, on the other hand, has sworn that he will not rest until he tracks down Veruvio and puts him down for good. Of the regional powers, a great many changes have been wrought upon the border princes. Some have increased their fortunes and renown, while others have fallen from the pages of history. Gilame de Carcassonne returned home to Bretonnia in shame and infamy. His army lost every engagement in which it fought, and his forces bled away until he was forced to abandon his crusade. However, he is only young. At 18 years old, he has many years to forge a new legend, and we may hear from him in future. The Tomb King Ramatep will barely be remembered. He fought the forces of chaos to a standstill before having his army annihilated by the army of Lady Phelan. His priests have returned his body to his casket in Libras, but it will be long before he threatens the world again. It seemed at one point that the dark sorcerer Greylord would achieve full demonhood and become a threat greater than any other in the region, having won many battles and caused much devastation. But just at his moment of apotheosis, he was struck down by the old blood Kroq-Gar, and his host was scattered to the wind. Having sat out most of the war, patiently biding his time, and he forgot that Kroq-Gar's lizard men were even in the area, until the closing weeks, he finally struck and rid the world of the evil Chaos Sorcerer. He then drove his host through a marching army of dwarves, before using a gate of the Old Ones to return to Lustria. Ragnar Odisson of Karak-Hern mostly made a good account of himself, securing his mining operation and ensuring that no forces ventured into the northern west to threaten dwarven interests in their mines. He was, however, humbled by the mysterious lizards just as the campaign season drew to a close and a new grudge has entered his book. Johann von Selby of the Empire has become a veritable legend in the lands of the Border Princes. There was not a single challenge that he did not rise to. Though he was pushed back several times, his forces always rallied around him and drove on for another push. Ultimately, he won more than he lost. His goal had been to hunt down the Chaos Warband led by Greylord, and upon learning that the enemy had fallen, Johann led his army home. The ogre tyrant Bubba the Fat threw around some big boasts, but was completely annihilated in his very first battle, when the forces of Chaos stood their ground in front of him. No one in the Border Princes will likely remember him or his army of gluttons. The Orc warlord, Gaza Sharpax, won no battles, and mostly just harassed trader caravans in the north. But in a stroke of bad luck for the locals, it seems that he has set up a permanent camp and might well pose a threat in years to come. Skaven Clawlord Ficus Fleaworm also had little luck in battle. However, for such a late comer, he had a devastating impact both on the prospects of victory for Lord Veruvial and the lives of the people of Aldium, when his army sacked the town and enslaved most of its inhabitants. And there you have it. 20 turns, 24 battles, and the campaign is over. In terms of rule generalship, John won a whopping 14 battles and only lost 5, while we both drew 5 battles. In terms of armies, the High Elves fought the most often, fighting 13 games and winning 8 of them. The Dark Elves never fought anyone that wasn't the High Elves, mostly due to being bottled up in their HQ for half the campaign. They only had 4 victories to their name. Out of the rogue armies, we obviously swapped control of them throughout the campaign, but both the Empire and Chaos forces were most prolific, having 6 battles apiece. The Hordes of Chaos actually only lost 1 battle, but as per the campaign rules, they were knocked out of the campaign when Greylord died and rolled up a permadeath on the injury chart. The worst performance of the campaign was easily the Ogres. They fought 1 battle, got massacred, and then were knocked out of the campaign in the same turn. But the worst win-loss ratio was the Bretonnians, who lost 3 out of 3 games. Overall, we enjoyed both the rotation of armies, keeping a narrative focus between our main factions whilst keeping it fresh throughout, and not many of the same battles in a row. The random movement and swapping of control meant they all felt like separate forces on the map and not just extensions of our own army to move around. So we hope you enjoyed the campaign, and thank you for continuing to support the channel. This has been Scott from the Mercenary Miniature YouTube channel. Please like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.